The fact that I'm holding a microphone and an iPad really betrays my Greek instincts to talk with my hands, so I apologize if I'm not as animated as you might expect. You might also notice my furrowed brows as well, and they might show my nerves standing in front of you all today, but really, they show that we have a really serious problem to discuss. This is a problem that concerns a young man by the name of Jake Bilardi, a name we probably all know quite well by now. When Jake conducted his suicide mission in the name of Daesh in February this year, he was barely 18, or he was 18, so technically he was an adult, but in reality he was barely that. From what we know of his story, Jake's story is punctured by immense loneliness, bubbling anger, and his making sense of the world in the dark confines of his own room and his own mind. From the age of 13, at the dawn of his own adolescence, he became fixated with violent resistance movements. He became obsessed with the idea of Western oppression and hypocrisy, untrustworthy media. He developed a warped sense of justice that was ultimately exploited. And he was an intelligent young man, and the irony of this situation was lost on him. His journey was a slow and lonely one. And from what we know, there was very little room for disruption, for new light to infiltrate that dark, dark place that he was in for a very long time, for far too long for anyone. He was in a really dangerous place for any child, let alone any person. I've had my fair share of experiences with mental health issues, and it's a dark place. Unfortunately, his story is not new, and we know that there are many more people out there like him. So now we're left in a situation that there's nothing in place for young people to digest the negative influences they're going to increasingly become exposed to as they get older, or the confusing and ubiquitous media, and sublimate those influences into something far more positive, actions that are far more positive, especially at that critical time in their development, which is their early teens, and it's an overlooked demographic in CVE programming. I think ultimately the sad and scary reality of Jake's tale is that it will be retold over and over with a new name in each headline if we don't provide support to some of the people and institutions in the best place to help young minds turn these negative external influences into positive actions, our schools. But we have a solution, and that solution is the Prism experience. Prism is a digital interactive teaching aid that helps teachers create the safe space for their students to digest media, to understand it, to unpack it, via the more salient features that they become exposed to on the peripheries, so the headlines and the images. And then it challenges the students to create their own responses to it. Next slide. So what does it do? In essence, it gives students the tools to think critically and exercise their power and agency in a positive way in response to those negative external influences, media or otherwise. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll now take you through the Prism, and I want you for a few minutes to be Jake when we do this together. Feel like him, be him. Imagine how scary and awful the world was starting to look at the turn, or on your journey to adulthood, basically, at the start of your teen years. If you need to, put yourself in a time of your life, in your early adolescence, where the world around you was in the dawn of getting a bit bigger and a bit darker. So, in its design, Prism is a teacher-driven, student-powered learning process where images and headlines related to certain topics are used as launching pads for discussion by a teacher. So it'll take shape in the form of a website or an app. So in a classroom setting, we are imagining students interacting with the questions and the imagery via an app that the teacher will get. Here we go. This is the discussion page where all the magic happens. So the images we chose as it relates to violent extremism focus on two very similar looking but very ideologically different images. There's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences, there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of ambiguities. Some people might not know how to take it, others might import their own narrative into it. But when we start the line of questioning with the students, we ask them how they feel about it first. We make them look at their own reactions, and then we bring them out and we make the connection to action. So Prism's real appeal is the anonymous feedback mechanisms in which they can communicate with their teacher in their class. So whether it's just a simple emoticon that they want to press to express a pretty basic feeling, or contribute text via the live feed, that'll be up there for everyone to see, but it won't be attributed to everyone. So if we just go back to Jake for a second and imagine him sitting in a classroom where he has access to something like this. Sorry. I guess what we think, well, the possibility for anonymous answers could have opened up an opportunity, whether in the safety of a classroom or outside the classroom, for a private discussion with a teacher about his concerns. If that is even a remote possibility or a remote chance of happening, that is a really positive outcome as a result of experiencing this. So this experience literally creates the opportunity for new light, new information to come into a young person's prism of the world. As you can see, this is what the teacher would see, and it aggregates the general feeling of the class. And between the newsfeed and the poll, this is where the launching pad for the discussion would take place. And this is where they can unpack the issues, and they can ask people to, talk about their interpretations, their thoughts, how they actually feel about this stuff. And then find your wavelength. And now we come to the action part of it, which is the Find Your Wavelength challenge that the students will be tasked with. So after undergoing the analysis and ruminating and looping and ideating over the pictures and images and headlines that they've just seen, we challenge them to come up with an image to counter or to respond to what they've just seen. So as you can see, there's the upload function, or they can save it and exit, or they'll submit it. So we are tasking and empowering the students, the people that we worry about the most, to be part of the solution, which is essentially what this hackathon process is about too. So it's almost bringing a hackathon-like process to the classroom and making it easy for teachers to facilitate this process. So after the images are shared or submitted, the teacher then has the discretion to upload it to Prism's social media apparatus, which will be shared and hopefully disseminated. And with other schools on board, might even cause some competition between the schools of positive works, whether it's prose, artwork, music, videos. It's an endless possibility of stuff. So what makes Prism such a valuable resource? Well, firstly, it's simple because it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It just uses existing technology in a smart and easy way. It's easy to adapt to other social policy issues, and not just violent extremism, which is what we're focusing on right now, but there's nothing to say that the content can't be adapted to things like climate change, marriage equality, whatever is of concern of that student body at that time. And I guess it's an easy, visual, immersive and safe way for students to deconstruct and make sense of the world as it emerges from the peripheries into their into their smartphones or whatever the case may be. So imagine if teachers had a resource like this in Jake's time. Maybe this could have helped him channel his energies into something far more positive. If this can't help him now, a learning experience like this in the safety of his school environment will help other people in his situation. So by supporting Prism, you help our schools to help our children find their wavelength and shine new lights into a dark media landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You mentioned that this uses existing technology. I know it's only been a couple of days,
yeah.
But have you had a look at what actual existing tools might exist within schools that you could tap into
Sure.
To create scale more easily?
Can I hand that over to our lovely designer, Nichelle?
Okay.
Hi. The model that we've based it off is based on some pre-existing software that's actually used in universities today, such as Socrative. These platforms allow teachers to currently speak with their students, ask them questions in real time, and get live feedback and live polls based on that, depending on what the class discussions are. And so it's taking that similar model and just expanding on it and really adding on to it to make it much more targeted towards something that could be useful towards this topic.
My question relates to teacher training. So in some ways, this is a relatively subjective matter. Have you thought about changing syllabus, change in how you deliver this training to teachers so that they can
Sure. Yeah, well, I guess the essence of what Prism aims to do is to not necessarily get people to, or get teachers, put teachers in a position where they have to tell right or wrong, but more to discuss the consequences of particular feelings and actions to ignite that critical thinking, which we're, as far as we're aware, is part of the national curriculum anyway and should be taught at a high school. So it's more that we want them to make it easy to engage with that particular aim that they've been tasked with trying to achieve.
Hi. One of the key things that we were looking at when we were developing the concept was to map the idea to existing curricula. So some of the ideas that would come out would be through media studies, through a communications unit, perhaps even an English subject. So that hasn't actually extensively been done, but we believe that there is scope to actually map it to an existing coursework and plug it in that regard.
Is the main intention of the program for teachers to identify children who seem to be troubled, or is it to give children or students the opportunity to put something back themselves, or is it both?
I would say it's the latter. Like, teachers have enough to think about. We're just trying to make this easy for them to open up a safe place for discussion about this stuff and tell kids really they have the power to choose their actions, you know, based on what they see, what they hear. You know, we've kept it visual-based and very headline-based because we think 13 to 16-year-olds in particular don't really engage as much in text-heavy news. So, you know, they're engaging with things that are on the periphery of their life that are gradually going to become more and more exposed to. So I would say it's more about telling kids that they have the power to respond and encouraging them to do it in a productive way.